Thanks, sir. How you doing, everybody? I'm Ben. I found out about this program through the VA. My counselor at the time reached out to me. He was aware that I'm a writer, and he said that this program seems really interesting. And I grew up in Barville. I joined the Marine Corps in 2005. I was in a little city called Fallujah in 2006. I believe Jacob and I treaded the same ground a little bit in different time periods. Something that's always been really interesting to me is the sort of sociological aspect of what it means to be a military service member in this country, especially in this time, coming off of the heels of how we treated service members from Tom's era in Vietnam. Was really, I feel like the pendulum kind of swung into the opposite direction, where now we just kind of, I'm kind of brushing broad strokes here, but we very much look at our veterans like these gods, these perfect sort of creatures. In this flash fiction piece that I wrote for Afterthoughts was meant to kind of dive into the lesser, maybe honorable aspects of service, more so the fact that bad people also wear the uniform. Not good people, less than honorable people, people who will do bad things. So I wrote this story about a con man who legitimately was a veteran. However, he didn't really do all the things that he said and did. And that is a really weird undercurrent of our society, of our culture, of the veteran culture. There's tons of people out there that are using the veteran platform to promote nonsense, to promote BS. One of the people that came to mind when I created this story was a person called Sarah Kavanaugh, who some of you may be familiar with who she is. Yes, yeah, I hear some hisses in the crowd. That is very appropriate. She is the first person to ever be like tried in what is more or less like a stolen valor case. She lied by saying that she was a Marine, combat wounded, Bronze Star, et cetera, all these kinds of awards. And she wasn't even a Marine, which is just horrible. And to think that she took advantage of so many people, including this group, Patrol Base Abate. Regardless, I kind of wanted to make something that kind of was just, I just wanted to make people think about the other things, the other side of, you know, this sort of, the pedestal that we put our veterans and our service members and our first responders and all these people who are doing incredible things that the majority of our society doesn't want to do, yet they're manipulating us in some ways. So I'm going to read a little portion of this, and then a lot of my stuff has been poetry. This is my first time ever doing like flash fiction and publishing it. So I really thank Amber and Sarah for giving me this opportunity. This has been really fantastic. So yeah, let's just get right into it. This is kind of picks up right in the middle of the story here, where Arthur, who is our veteran in question, is talking to a younger person who is prospecting to join the military. Arthur casually leaned back in his chair. It creaked under his weight. He had just explained to Cameron how brave his father was in combat. He had seen it firsthand when they were dropped into the jungles of Cambodia on a black op, an even more secretive and deadly level of irregular warfare. When we pushed out of the camp, there were 14 prisoners altogether. That was a lot more than the briefing had anticipated, but we couldn't leave them behind, Cam. Your father, he looked at me and he said, "We've got to get these Americans home." So that's what we did. It took nearly half a day to get them all out. Each time the chopper landed, we got swarmed and had to fight our way out. Your father and I were both shot up good, but we kept fighting, and they just kept coming, Arthur said. Cameron's mouth hung agape as he heard the story. He hadn't known his dad, Maxwell Gibbons. He died soon after Cam was born. When he was 14, he met Arthur and finally felt like he had a father figure in his life. He was stunned to discover that Arthur had known and served with his dad. His head rushed, excited to get to know his father outside of pictures or letters. What was he like after the battle? Drugged up from the morphine, Arthur laughed and signaled the closest server for a refill. But proud, real proud. He was a man who didn't think about himself, only others. I remember our last mission together. You were there when he died? Cameron asked. I was among the last people to see him alive, Cam. It's horrible what happened that day. God rest his soul. He went down swinging, though, son, I tell you. He must have dropped about 29 of those bastards before they got him. Cameron became overwhelmed with a connection to Arthur that he had never imagined. It was as if this stranger entered his life to become a conduit to his father's lost mythos. Those stories poured out of Arthur as Cam pried. Photos emerged. Arthur and Max on a helicopter together, out on patrols with rifles and tactical gear. Arthur was particularly proud of his photo with the Secretary of Defense in 1980. That man was a hard charger, I tell you. He did us right each and every time. He gave your father that silver star. Long before they had met, Cameron had scoured his father's pictures, envisioning himself in tiger-striped camouflage, carrying a fully automatic carbine through the jungles of Southeast Asia. His inspiration to follow in his father's footsteps intensified as he pored over the new pictures. Cameron felt emboldened one afternoon as the pair lazily finished lunch at a restaurant. I've been thinking about it, and I want to be like you and my dad. I talked to the Ranger recruiter last week. He said he could sign me up on a special contract. The Rangers? Maybe you should tone it down a bit. What do you mean? They're an elite level unit. You are you. Arthur wiped gravy from his face. When was the last time you did anything elite, Cam? Cameron shifted. The recruiter said I could train. I'm still young. I can get strong. Arthur sighed and looked down at the floor. You gave up on getting strong. All this time, you should have been making something of yourself, but nah. Cameron searched the room as if answers would appear in the wood paneling and yellowed menus. Arthur had always been his champion, except when the military came up. As soon as Cam showed interest in volunteering, Arthur had to chop it down into greatest dreams. The outfit we were in was handpicked, selected from the top infantry units. If you aren't going to be a grunt, you might as well just go to college, learn a trade, Arthur said. I have what it takes, Cameron said. Cam, you don't have a violent bone in your body. You're better off just staring at computer screens all day. That's what you're good at anyway. Don't try and get into a man's world. You just won't fit in. Arthur pushed his plate aside and fished money out of his pocket. He tossed a couple dollars down and stood. I'm going home. I'll see you around. Just like that, Arthur was a stranger. Yeah, see you, Cam said. Nighttime.
Yeah. So one aspect of your piece that stood out to me was that rather than writing from the perspective of a soldier or a veteran, your point of view character is a military spouse. What drove this decision?
The military spouses, I think, are very often overlooked, especially the spouses of service members that have gone through multiple deployments or just, even just any sort of deployment, especially if you have young kids. I think that the spouse bears a very unique burden in that way. And I also think that we don't give enough attention to our Gold Star families, who are the families of those fallen in battle. So I think that it was just kind of an interesting perspective for me to try and take on what it might be like to put myself in the perspective of somebody who is just kind of watching these sorts of things unfold, and they just kind of have to deal with them as they happen.
This story is very rooted in day-to-day local life. What made you decide to base your story in Rhode Island?
That's a pretty straightforward answer. I knew it was going to be published in the West Warwick Public Library, and I figured everybody was going to be checking out the Rhode Island. So, know your audience, folks. Know your audience. So that was basically. I wanted people to just pick it up and be like, "Oh, I recognize that town. Or I recognize it." I had a couple creative liberties, but yeah, it is set in Rhode Island. And I wanted people to Just kind of find a connection.
And after going through this writing program, what advice do you have for new writers?
Stay hungry. Don't be afraid to continue to jump into just keeping yourself educated. When I came into this program, I had 3 published books under my belt, but I didn't let any of that stop me from wanting to learn, to wanting to hone my craft better. And the course itself was magnificent, and it really reminded me of why I got into writing and the things that made it fun for me, but also made it a little bit of a challenge. So just get after it and stay hungry.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you.